Good morning, everyone. This is the first of today's videos on chapter 30 of Huck Finn. Today we're going to be doing the two final chapters. All right, so let me just pull up the PowerPoint here. All right, so chapter 30. Okay, so if you remember, chapter 29 ends with the king and the duke getting back on the raft. Huck and Jim thought they had been free of the two of them, and of course they come running out of the woods just in time to be able to jump onto. Actually, they come out on a canoe, right, from the town, having avoided the Wilkes controversy with the two real Wilkes brothers showing up. And they are able to get back on the raft with Huck and Jim. Now, question one asked you to consider, and please have your question packets out, and please have your books and notes out. So the question said, what are the king and the duke fighting about? All right, so the first thing, when they first get on the raft, obviously they're mad because they thought they thought Huck was trying to get away from them. And they were. So they actually were, there was something to the argument, right? Of course, Huck comes up with an excuse, that, he saw an opportunity and he didn't know where they were and he thought they were arrested and they were just simply trying to help themselves and, weren't really trying to get away from the king and the duke. But the king gets a hold of Huck, right? He has a hold of him and he's yelling at him. And the Duke responds with his first little bit of positive behavior in this chapter. And it's right on page 155 at the beginning of the chapter, right? He's the king is shaking Huck and mad at him. And Duke says, "Let go the boy, you old idiot. Would you have done any different? Did you inquire around for him when you got loose? I don't remember it." And so the king lets go of Huck when the Duke points that out, that he, of course, hadn't bothered to think about Huck and Jim when he had gotten loose. So that's the first time. So they turn their attention away from Huck and are now kind of talking with each other. And it's clear that each one believes the other is responsible for putting the money in the coffin because they wanted to get away with stealing it from the other one. And so they kind of dance around it a little bit. And, one says, I didn't put it in there. And the other, I didn't put it in there either. And finally, the king keeps denying it, right? So the king keeps denying it. And then the Duke has enough and he grabs the king and he's got him by the throat. And he asks him point blank, you did hide that money there intending to give me the slip one of these days, come back and dig it up, right? And he's certain that that's the case. And the king is struggling against him and the Duke is turning tighter. And the king comes back with, "Well, tell me the truth. Did you at any point think that you were going to do that?" Right? And this is the second time that the Duke says, right, "Well, I may have thought about doing it," meaning taking the money and hiding it from the king. He's like, "But I never actually did it. I only ever thought about it." And they each put the other in there. And so now they're totally mad at each other. And the other reason that they're really kind of mad at each other is obvious because they didn't actually make any money, right? The king ruined it to some extent by being so incredibly greedy that he didn't get out of town. He wanted every last cent that he could get from the Wilkes, and as a result, they actually don't make any money at all. So that upsets them too. So that's really why they're fighting. They're blaming each other for it. Now, so what is the point of this argument? Well, Twain wants you to consider the fact that these two are just as Oh, sorry about the typo there. These two are just as dumb as the townspeople that they have fooled all along this trip down the Mississippi, right? So the whole reason they suspected the money was taken by the slaves that were sold is because Huck suggested it. And yet they never turned to Huck and ask him any questions about the money. And Huck is standing there feeling very uncomfortable. He says it two different times, right? That was making him uncomfortable, that they were talking about the gold, thinking that they would turn to him, but they don't, right? So they're just as bad as the people that they're fooling along the way. Now, the king eventually confesses to putting the gold in the coffin. So why does he do that? Well, it's because the Duke has his hands around his neck and is strangling him. And so he's coerced into, he's coerced into saying that he was the one who put the money in there, right? In a bomb. So, and, the Duke believes him, feels better about it, and takes his hands off the king's neck. All right, so that's pretty much question one. All right, so question two is, why do they get back together? Well, it's because they start drinking. They start drinking independent of each other, right? One drinks and the other drinks. And then eventually they, as Huck says, are thick as thieves again. And so, the two of them fall asleep in each other's arms. So they deserve each other, right? But it's also important to consider who Twain has abusing alcohol in this story, right? So Pap, obviously, is an alcoholic and he's despicable. Boggs gets himself killed because he is abusing alcohol and can't see reason. The mob in Brickville drinking, right, gave them liquid courage to do something that they shouldn't have been doing. And then, of course, the Duke and the King. And Twain wants you to see the Duke and King in the same light as those others who abuse alcohol, from these supposedly civilized people. Right? These are the parts of the South that are supposedly civilized. And they, of course, indulge in greed, they indulge in alcohol, they indulge in slavery, and all of it makes them quite uncivilized. My favorite part of chapter 30, though, is the last part. The last line of the chapter. Once the king and the Duke fall asleep together, Huck says, "That made me feel easy and satisfied. Of course, when they got to snoring, we had a long gabble, and I told Jim everything." So, right, he confides in Jim. He tells Jim everything that happened because Jim is his friend, confidant, father figure. So once the king and the Duke are out of the picture, the relationship can be what it has developed into being. So consistent in that sense. All right, so that's pretty much it on chapter 30. We have lots to talk about in chapter 31. So please move on to the next video. Thank you.